Hey Canucks fans, is defenseman Quinn Hughes worth $8 million a year for the next 8 years? I'm Canuck Clay. I'm the founder of the GLCPC, the Good Looking Canucks Positivity Club. This is my Canucks take all in one take. It's Clay's Canucks commentary for Tuesday, June the 29th. Subscribe for Canucks insight that's positive, timely, and trustworthy. And today, more than ever, I invite you to subscribe as I'm only 5 or 6 followers away from 6,600. It's the goal I set to hit by the end of the month of June. So I basically have 2 days to get that. So if you have been coming to this channel for a bit and you haven't subscribed yet, I certainly invite you to do so today. Make that change. Okay, let's talk about Quinn Hughes. Yesterday, Elliotte Friedman, appearing on the Donnie and Dolly show on Czech TV, was talking, as he usually does, about the Canucks, about contracts. And we know that the next contract for Elias Pettersson and Quinn Hughes, for both players, that's going to be the biggest storyline of this offseason. An offseason that's going to have a lot of good storylines, admittedly. The expansion draft, the entry draft, free agency, buyouts, all these things. But a lot of what the Canucks will be able to do is going to be dictated on how much money they have remaining after signing Elias Pettersson and Quinn Hughes. Now, I've done a few vlogs on this topic already, and I don't want to repeat myself, so I want to move into some new territory here. So I'm not going to talk too much about Elias Pettersson in this one, other than saying that it's still sounding like he's going to do a bridge deal, 3 years, and that the Matthew Barzal contract from a couple years ago of $21 million for 3 years, so 777, that might be kind of a baseline or a ballpark. So if he comes within a few $100,000 either side of that $7 million a year, that would make sense to me. But let's talk about Quinn Hughes. Very, very interesting, because Elliotte Friedman says that he has heard that there's 3 of them, Quinn Hughes, Cale Makar, and Miro Heiskanen, that they are looking to make money. They're looking for long-term deals north of, better than what Ottawa Senators defenseman Thomas Chabot signed a couple years ago. Now, Chabot signed after his second year, so his ELC wasn't even done yet. After 2 of the 3 years, he signed a $64 million contract. So 8 years at $8 million a year, $8 million a season. And it's important to note that Chabot did sign it, after his 2 years, because his second year was really good. He had 55 points in 70 or 71 games. So 55 in 70. And I'm going to say this a couple times. With defensemen, it's simply not just about offense. It's not just about points per game. But that's one, obviously, easy metric that we can look at. After Chabot signed that 8-year contract, in his first year, he struggled a little bit. He actually came down to about 39 points in 70 games. So he dropped from 55 to 39 points in the same amount of games. Again, not the points are not the end-all and be-all, but one indicator. And then just this past season, a bit of an improvement. He had 31 points, down from 39, but in only 50 games as opposed to 70. So his points per game went up to over more than half a point a game. So Thomas Chabot, since he signed that contract, he's basically played 120 games, and he has 79 points, 39 and then 31. So in doing that, 70 points in 120 games, that's about a 0.58 points per game. So let's say 0.6 points per game. So keep that in the back of your mind for a second. So that's Chabot. Again, 8 years, $8 million. And this word from Elliotte Friedman that this group of 3 players, Makar, Hughes, and Heiskanen, see themselves as, he didn't use the word better, but above that or more than that. But in essence, he's saying that these 3 players feel that they are better. And it's interesting that it's these 3 guys, because I know many people have been talking about the big 4 when it comes to young defensemen, of Hughes, Makar, Heiskanen, and Rasmus Dahlin was often put in there. He's had a rougher go of it, probably because he has the worst team of the 4 in the Buffalo Sabres. So Dahlin is maybe not part of that group anymore, at least not yet, even though Dahlin was the first overall pick in his year. So again, it's Makar, Hughes, and Heiskanen. And then I'd say, by the way, after you include Dahlin, I think there's also another young group of guys like Chabot, of Shea Theodore, of Charlie McAvoy, of Zach Werenski. And speaking of McAvoy and Werenski, if Quinn was going to go bridge deal 3 years, we would use numbers like that, 4.9, 5.2, 5.5, kind of in the 5 to 5.5 range as comparables. But everything that we've heard is that Pettersson's going to sign the bridge, and then Hughes will sign the long term. By the way, interesting point. I heard Chris Gear, the assistant GM of the Canucks, say that they have to do this in order because they can't sign Hughes first. And then imagine if they sign Hughes, for instance, what we're talking about, to an 8-year, $8 million contract. Then the Canucks don't want to put themselves in a position where they sign Hughes before Petey. And then it gives off the impression that maybe the Canucks are going to have trouble signing Petey with not a lot of money and therefore gets offer sheeted. I know that's a couple points you got to put together. So I fully expected them to announce Pettersson first and then announce Hughes after that. But that's another side point. Is Quinn Hughes worth $8 million at $8 million a season for 8 seasons? So his numbers offensively are better than Chabot's. Remember I talked about that Chabot in the 2 seasons since, he's at a 0.6 points per game, while Hughes is more at a 7.75, 0.8 points per game. His rookie season did really well. Then this past season, he still had 41 points in 56 games, which is still up there. So like in the 0.7 points per game range. So Hughes is a better offensive player than Chabot. Is he a better defensive player? Well, Hughes had a really rough year defensively for many reasons that I've talked about before. But also, I got to see the Ottawa Senators play 9 times this season because of the North Division. And I actually thought that Chabot had his struggles defensively as well. In fact, I can remember a couple times where he gave away pucks to the Vancouver Canucks leading directly to goal. So if I was to compare Quinn Hughes to Thomas Chabot, I'd say, yeah, I think Hughes is a bit of a better player. Definitely more offensive upside. And Hughes, being 2 or 3 years younger, can grow into the defensive side. So if you're looking at it objectively like that, forget about Makar, who's I think in a way should be able to make even more than that, and forget about Heiskanen, who had a great playoff, Dallas against Tampa in the final last season, kind of a coming out party for him. He wasn't as good offensively as say Hughes and Makar this year, but still played a decent season. So if we're talking about Quinn Hughes specifically, yeah, I think he is worth. If I didn't know what Chabot was making, I would say, yeah, he's a better player than Thomas Chabot. Now, does that mean he's worth $8 million for 8 years? That's a lot. That's a lot for a team that is already up against the cap. And we know that the Canucks are going to have to do some cap maneuvering this season until they finally get out of the contracts of Roussel, Beagle, Eriksson, and Holtby and the cap recapture penalty at the end of next season. So the Canucks got to be careful for this season. But if you're signing Hughes long term to $7.5, $8 million, obviously that counts against cap starting this season. So it's got to be something the Canucks are anticipating. So all to say, yeah, I think Hughes is better than Chabot. Does that mean he's worth $8 million a season? That's 10% of your salary cap, right? And for a team that's, every team's going to have salary cap challenges, given the flat cap, COVID, all these things. But the Canucks especially have, I'd say they'd have more cap problems than, say, Ottawa did 2 seasons ago when they signed Chabot to that deal back in 2019. What do I think Hughes is going to get? He might want $8 million a season. I don't know if the Canucks are going to go there because that's making more than Brock, that's making more than Bo, than JT Miller now, and then Brock's going to come up soon next season, JT Miller and Horvat the season after that. So with these 2 contracts, Pettersson and Hughes, it's going to shape kind of the internal cap structure of the Canucks. So what's my conclusion? What's my guess? Well, if Petey's going to go bridge at 7, can you give Hughes 8 more than that? Can you give him $1 million? Can you give him $8 million for 8 years? That might be the starting point. That might be where they start negotiations. My gut feeling is I think Hughes signs for maybe 6 or 7 years at $6 or $7 million, maybe $7 million. If you're committing that long term, you got to go more than 6. So maybe a 7x7 is more realistic than an 8x8. But as a Canucks fan, obviously I'd be happy if he signed an an 8-year contract as opposed to a 7. It guarantees 1 more year of him. At least from a contract standpoint. And maybe when you're talking about $8 million versus $7 million a year, then maybe it's worth sucking it up next season, the extra $1 million, 8 versus 7, because you're getting an extra year out of them at the end of the contract. So lots of things to think about. What's my gut feeling then? I would say I'd be happy with 7 years at $7 million a year for Hughes if we're going long term. If we were going bridge, I'd say 5.5 or 6. But because we're going long term, maybe you're looking at 7 or 7.5. I'm not sure if it gets to 8, but unless it's 8 years. But let's say 7 years, between $7 and $7.5 million. That's kind of like my first initial thought. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Put a comment down below. Do you think Hughes is worth Shabbat money? So my answer to that is yes. But do you think he's going to get Shabbat money? So my answer to that is no. But I'd love to know what you think. And you can use whatever guide you want, bridge, long-term, 7 years, 8 years, 3 years. Give me a dollar amount, give me a term. Tell me what you think is going to happen with Quinn Hughes and why. Leave a comment below. I love to read, react, and reply as always. Shout out to my Hall of Fame members, Jens95, Sim Alexander, Justin Credible, nucksfan number 29, Lucas Gates, Chris Seifried, Adam Broomfield, Shea Family Channel, Jamie Sports Talk and more, and Shannon Hollingworth. Thanks for your support as always, and thanks to the support of members of all levels. You are listed in my video description. If you want to become a member of the CCC Crew, press the join button underneath this or any of my videos or in the memberships tab on my YouTube channel. So let's build that membership. Let's definitely build that subscriber base. Only a few hundred from 6,600. Sorry, a few away from 6,600. I'm so excited to get to that 6,600 number. I would love for you to subscribe. Would love to get your support. So subscribe if you'd like to. Like this video if you'd like to. Become a member of this channel if you'd like to. And leave a comment down below about Quinn Hughes and your prediction for his next contract. Stay safe, stay healthy, take care of yourselves and take care of each other, and drink a lot of water. God bless, and go Canucks go.